Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Hello. So thank you very much for joining us. Whether you're joining our LinkedIn Live or later, it's a pleasure to have you here. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Kasey Zun, who's the head of global head of diversity and inclusion for Ashurst, and Leah Ferguson, who's the organisational development consultant for MYOB. So welcome, ladies. It's great to have you here. Today we're going to be chatting about work practices we're bringing to 2021. And what are those inclusive conversations that we're having with our parents and caregivers around flexibility, how we can support them better after what we learned from 2020, and ensuring that we're providing a consistent experience for all of our employees across all of our offices. So thank you, ladies, for joining us.
Thank you.
Kasey, I might turn to you. Would you like to give an acknowledgement of the country before we get started?
Yeah, thank you. Well, look, and thank you everyone for having me here today. And for those of you watching later on, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of which we meet on today. I'm Wurundjeri land of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to my elders, past, present, and emerging. So thank you.
Great. And I'd just like to pay my respects. I'm currently on the land of the Boonwurrung people, and I'd like to acknowledge their connection to land, sea and country, and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging.
Thank you, ladies. So we caught up a little bit yesterday ahead of today's session, and we were having a conversation around what it's been like this past year and where we're heading into in this year. And after what's been a roller coaster of a year last year, I'd love to know, how are you feeling now coming out of the other side and in preparation for 2021? Kasey, how has it been for you?
Look, much better now. I'm based in Melbourne, so we had a pretty hard slog last year, and I think now, sort of coming into 2021, I think relieved is the word. But also, look, I'm cautiously optimistic is another word I would use if I'm looking at it from sort of a future of work perspective as well. I think as probably one of the only positives that I think that came out of last year is like the way that we work, the way that we're working together. I mean, something like this a year ago, it wouldn't have been something that we would have done frequently, whereas now it's sort of, every day, what Zoom or what catch up do I have today? And just the flexibility that has sort of come with last year has been a big one as well. But yes, I think in summary, cautiously optimistic is how I am feeling.
Just for the resilience levels, you can't be too optimistic, right?
Yeah, it gets taken away otherwise.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I think for you, Leah.
Yeah, definitely. So I think for me, it was just that sense of being exhausted. And we know that there was a lot of fatigue that happened across the organisation. And I know that probably other organisations felt that as well from, such a roller coaster of a year. I'm also in Melbourne. So there was some pretty harsh lockdowns, but definitely had a well-deserved break. And we did a break for the whole company for about 2.5 weeks. So really needed that downtime, no screens, nothing like that, to really recharge to be optimistic this year and think about the learnings that we made. As you said, Kasey, there was a lot that we learned in terms of just everyone being able to work remotely was the first one, but it really embedded some of the practices that we had started to initiate across the organisation. So really looking forward to bringing those learnings that we had around, especially around personal productivity and when your best time to focus, when best time to collaborate is, and be able to, use those learnings this year to be really successful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've likened it, as a single working mum. 2020 was very taxing and exhausting, and I've likened this year to a bit of a burnout hangover, if you will.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just taking the time really to focus on self-care and to make sure that I'm getting the adequate rest that I need. And I think I speak for all of our team when I say that. So it is very important to factor that in, especially for our parents and carers who have, their second job after they finish their
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's interesting with that as well. I think a lot of people sort of coming back from that break, you speaking to colleagues, I think this year in particular, everybody has come back saying, right, we're putting boundaries in place. This is what we're going to do. Here's how I'm going to sort of run my day. Whereas I don't think that has happened in previous years gone by. So yeah, Jules, I completely agree.
And even that holistic conversation about those boundaries and some of the disciplines that you need to put in there. I know Clear Wallage talks on the platform, Circle-In platform, a lot about putting yourself first and, knowing those markers around burnout. And so as we've had a break, to be able to think about what that is and to put those in place, I think it's going to be really important this year.
Absolutely. We were just having a conversation about that yesterday. Around putting the oxygen mask on yourself first.
Yeah.
That resonates with a lot of people. So Kasey, I'll turn to you. How have things changed for you and for Ashurst in general in terms of your ways of working now? What COVID? What initiatives have you rolled out?
Yeah, there's been quite a few things. So look, for us, pretty early on in the process, we realised straight away that for us, flexibility. I mean, we went from obviously everyone generally working in offices a lot of the time. We had some people who work from home occasionally and so forth, and we had something in place called our sort of smarter working initiative, which was sort of obviously to structure your day around work and your personal responsibilities. However, all of a sudden March hit and the whole company globally was working remotely, and that was a really big change for people, and just sort of getting into a little bit of a rhythm there. And what we noticed pretty quickly was people were really enjoying it. They were sort of collaborating really effectively together. They were having more time to focus on their own personal well-being. And for those of us that were working parents as well, I mean, you had quite a lot of time with the kids, with homeschooling and remote learning and so forth. But we had some really nice moments as well. And so we jumped on it pretty quickly and said, right, how can we capture the good things that have come out of this and bring it into the new normal and the new ways of working for Ashurst. So we ran a number of sort of different insight sessions. We had some online jams where people were jumping in and providing sort of their thoughts and feedback, coming in with some really in-depth conversations and smaller sessions there. And really, we had quite a few key themes, but the one I think that was sort of probably most relevant for this conversation was around the wellbeing angle and just that resilience and how we want to make sure that we don't go back to that burnout we had before, but also maintaining the flexibility so you've got time to structure your life and be present with your kids at home and just have a little bit more of that balance as a working parent. So they were the themes that we identified, and then I think we'll probably touch on this a little bit later, but then jumped into sort of design mode to say, right, well, what can we do to maintain this? But yeah, I just think some of the comments that were coming through from our staff, they were just really enlightening on different and creative ways that we could work together and still be really productive, but just having that greater sense of self and well-being at home.
Absolutely. We did a similar exercise as well around having those future of work sessions, having focus groups with all of our employees and just getting that feedback from across the board. It's so important to have that perspective from everyone else. And we even went so far as we engaged Sean Hall from Energex to run sessions for us around when are people's best times to work, what suits them best. Are you a morning person? Are you an evening person? Let's look at how we can focus working hours around the peak energy levels that we have and the other things outside of work. So yeah, it seems to be something that most companies are looking at now. And Leah, what about for MYOB? We were speaking yesterday around Experience 2.0 and then some new initiatives that you're rolling out currently. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we were really well set up, as much as you could be, to go into the remote working that we had to do. So at the beginning of last year, we moved into a 90-day planning cycle. So there we updated our performance cycle, as well as thinking about how do we really measure value add activities rather than thinking about things like FaceTime. So we had our digital experience team with a number of different ways, which I know we'll touch on probably a little bit later, to be able to maintain connection and across that. So when we moved into remote working, it wasn't something which was completely unusual to people. Obviously, it stressed the systems and all of those sorts of things out. But what we wanted to do is just really maintain the practices that we already had in terms of, we call it the flex experience. So we spoke about flex experience being flex time, flex place, and flex learning as well. And we looked at some of the markers that we already had. So thinking about our engagement survey. So we run a full survey once a year and 2 pulse surveys. So what we saw was that it actually didn't really variate much between working at home versus when we were all together as well. And it stayed pretty steady throughout the year. One of the themes that we saw that really came up was the level of communication. I don't think our levels of communication had ever been as high. So we implemented things like weekly executive updates and the continued flow of information and communication as well. So that was one of the ways that we saw that was really, really worked. And we absolutely want to make sure that we continue to keep doing that. We also ran surveys that were specific on these topics and focus groups as well. So very similar, I'm sure, but we found that our team members really saw that they were so productive at home that it was about probably 2 to 3 days was the majority of where people saw themselves coming back into the office as well. And to be able to supplement all of this with, in terms of mental health, which we know was one of the challenges that people faced throughout COVID. We work with Smiling Mind. There's a workplace digital program there. So we did a month of mindfulness and continue to support those people that need the Smiling Mind support, as well as I mentioned earlier that we did mental health training. So we have a number of people. So really thinking about the holistic experience. Were some of the things that we absolutely, took some real learnings on to carry into this year.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really good point there, that holistic experience. And I think with both from a working parent's angle, but then a wellbeing angle as well, I think it's really important. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for somebody else as well. So having sort of that range of things available, we found was really helpful. In Melbourne, in the thick of lockdown, we launched a virtual school holiday program during the day for our kids, and that was so cool. And we're looking at doing that, unfortunately, with some of our groups that are in a really tough lockdown over the other side of the world at the moment. And then similar with Smiling Mind, we launched Headspace to a Headspace subscription for our people as well. And it was just these sort of little things that maybe a little bit more out of the box compared to what we usually would have done that I think resonate. But it's like what you said, I think it's just that a few different things and giving people choice, I think, on how to manage it.
Yeah, I think one of the things we call a circling platform, the Parents Hub. So even running sessions around that, and the Wellness Hub was supported at the same time, and for managers to be able to understand that, this is unprecedented circumstances, and having kind of live events for people to come to. We saw a great uptake in things like that as well. So yeah, I really agree. Multifaceted approach. One size definitely did not fit all.
Yes, absolutely. And ladies, with these practices that you've started to roll out now, what's been the initial response from everyone at Ashurst and MYOB?
Yeah. Look, I think for us, one of the really big factors that came through, because we took a really consultative approach about what people wanted to see moving forward, and sort of, as I said, the themes around flexibility, autonomy, and that wellbeing piece as well. We needed to make sure we designed sort of a solution as such that met all of these, and as such we launched something that we call our hybrid working model, where the intention is that when you're able to return to the office, noting that we've had a few dips in that across different regions as well, we would really sort of set the sort of set the scene to come in a couple of days a week, really probably on a 60-40 basis. So we had feedback from people that just said they really still wanted that time in the office to connect and to build those personal relationships. And one thing that came through quite a lot was just those water cooler conversations that you and just the casual conversations that you miss. But likewise, they wanted the flexibility to be able to be present at home and to be productive at home as well. And we felt that this was sort of the happy medium for everyone, and it was received, I think, really well. And I think the big piece that we did around the launch of this was to say that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. For some teams, they're going to be spending more time at home, and for some individuals, they're going to be working from different locations. For others, it may be a personal preference to be in the office a little bit more, and that's okay. But what we really said is make communication the key and really empower our people managers and the partners of the firm to carry out these conversations and to connect. And I mean, we did a whole heap of work of preparing toolkits around this and different support mechanisms and tools that people could refer to. And I think it's slowly, in some locations, it's coming to sort of the new sense of normal. In others, I think for Melbourne, for example, we're not quite there yet because most of us are not back in the office. Next week, I think. And then for other locations, like our poor friends in the UK at the moment, they're at home. When they're back, it will start working towards that. So we're being really flexible with our approach there.
Yeah, and I think we don't have the global kind of challenges that sounds like, Kasey, you might have within such different spaces, but we have from these learnings, and I really believe that the co-creation, so getting as much feedback as possible and as much buy-in, we have created something that we're now calling the Flex Deal. So based on our experience, thinking about the types of tasks to be done. So with your individual experience, so knowing where your productivity, and Jules, you mentioned, the energies that you get and the best time for you to work, that people are much more aware of that from COVID. So thinking about the productivity gains as each individuals, and then the role that people are required to do. So, how much time you spend with others, and as much time as an individual, but also the team outcomes as well. So really thinking about those three things as an individual, the role that you do and the team that you're in, and really empowering people leaders to be able to create this Flex Deal. So that's something which, as an agreement and a deal to be done amongst the team, which empowers everyone to be able to come to that agreement, because we absolutely see value in coming together face-to-face together. And I mentioned, as we spoke earlier, that we have an amazing new office in Melbourne. It's been sitting there for about 6 months, and that's part of our Flex Place, is to really think about the different types of work that we need to get done. So we absolutely want people to be able to connect, and being an organisation that helps small businesses start, survive and succeed, we want to be able to support our local businesses, the cafes that are around us and all of that. So we see the value in doing that, but making it an agreement that people leaders make with their teams as well, to give them the tools to be able to do that, rather than, some of the things that we have heard is, meeting-free days and some of those things that we don't really want to make it a blanket rule, as we don't see that as being true flexibility. True flexibility is that agreement that you make as a team based on the role that you're doing and how you like to work and how your team works as well.
Yeah, completely agree with that.
And from both of you guys, around that connection piece being really super important. It's the same for us at Circle In. We have a physical office in Melbourne that we go to, but we make sure that we have, whether it's like the team get together on a particular day, or we have different sort of working groups that meet up in the office, so we can actually have that human connection and be able to share your day with someone other than just on a video call. And then I guess the other thing too is that communication piece is so important. And you mentioned, Kasey, around really empowering the people leaders and exec team to communicate those changes. And to make sure we're all on the same page about where everyone's at. And I suppose this is something that comes up a fair bit in response to this new sort of flex way of working, is how do we keep track of where everyone is?
Yeah.
How do we roster this? How do we ensure that everyone has an opportunity to meet up in the same place when we all have different needs and different designs around how and when we work. So for you both, do you have any tools that you're using currently to help you manage that process, in terms of IT tools or project management tools that give people leaders that visibility?
Yeah. That's I think for us, look, we're a law firm. In terms of measuring productivity for our lawyers, it's a pretty simple tool called the billable hour, and obviously it is an indicator. However, I really don't want to say it's the only indicator, because it's certainly not. Because we want to make sure that we're sort of developing our staff and supporting them to be. You can be completing work, absolutely. But the quality of work and the sense of pride that you take in your work, that can absolutely change, depend on sort of how productive you feel that you are. So for us, look, we can certainly measure that, and we have been able to see that absolutely this new model, people are being more productive. But at the same time, we've been using sort of, as we said, a lot of sort of employee pulse checks and surveys and so forth to see how people are feeling, how they're responding to the changes that are happening within their particular location as well, because it has been quite of a bumpy ride for a number of people. And then I guess for other tools that sit around, we were very lucky. I think, like Leah, we were set up just to tackle COVID in terms of technology. Our poor IT team were in the middle of a whole global rollout of all of our new systems, and it was due to finish, I think, in the June of 2020. They managed to finish it with, I think it was pretty much by April. So thank goodness for that. And now we're really set up. And I think for us, it's about putting in place measures so that when we've got in-office meetings now for the offices that are back, well, most of the time they're via Zoom anyway. You have that option. And that was something we've always wanted to do prior, but it just never quite took off. Whereas now, there's no guarantee that people will be in the office, and there's no expectation either, which is really important. So it's making sure that we're set up from sort of a tech perspective to be able to carry on and work in a way that people are comfortable with, but also making sure that people are still thriving and having conversations about their career and what's impacting them as well. That's all been really important.
Yeah, and so we're a little bit different in some circumstances. In our call centres, we do have quite a large customer service and call centres, and that absolutely is one of the measures that we're able to see how people are going. So everything within that environment is quite measured. And so we have seen huge productivity gains of people. And in terms of overall well-being or how people are going in terms of having a distracted environment, there's some of the things that can easily be seen, and then conversations can be had to be able to support that. So whether that's coming into the office, if there was an environment where people felt that they were able to work well, and also thinking about having conversations about how people are going. That was one of the ways in which we did that in the contact centre. We also are on Teams and on Slack. So being a tech environment, but having the Microsoft Office suite. And so I think we did a piece of work on workplace analytics. So through the Teams to be able to see what uptake was, how engaged people were. And not surprisingly, we saw a huge increase in the use of Teams, and actually surprisingly a decrease in emails. So people contacting each other more in terms of on a Teams environment than within emails as well. When we did the focus groups, we did hear some feedback on, I feel like I need to be on my Teams all the time, versus I actually find it really good because I don't have walk-ups, so you can check it when you need to check it. So implementing things like the focus time, which my analytics automatically does if you have that as a feature on your Teams, as it says it's in the do not disturb, but also making statuses. So statuses in Slack and in Teams as well. So being really clear clear on that, and clear on, things like, which, going back to 101, sharing calendars so you can see different people's availability and time to be able to see whether they're online or offline, or, where they are. Definitely using those shareable ways of seeing if people are contactable or not.
Yeah.
That's definitely been some of the tools that we've used.
And I think those tools, I think that's going to really take us into this year as well. And sort of when people are starting to make their way back to the office and so forth, it's not going to be like it was before where everybody's going to be in on every day and so forth. And it's using sort of what we have in the last year to really take us forward to the future. And we've sort of done that with a lot of our teams to say, look, it's really going to be team-based. We've got these tools like you can use, but find the best one for your particular team so people know when you're around and also when not to bother you as well. It's really important.
Yeah, and I feel like we're very spoiled for choice. So we have a lot of different tools that people will use. So whether it's Confluence or even Miro. And, personally, I found it so confusing to start off with. But as a collaboration tool, Miro is amazing to be able to, to collaborate, but also use through a project team as well. And then things like Planner and, Trello and some of those ones that people use. And it is, about identifying what's right for the team and what's going to work best and which tools are people going to use, because sometimes you can be spoiled for choice. So just being upfront and using those as well.
Yeah. We have the same here at Circle N, where we as part of the Future of Work sessions we ran, we looked at all of the apps, all of the tools that we use across the business, and realised we have a lot. And we got a little bit of sort of app fatigue, if you will. So we revisited all of that. Which are the tools that are going to work best for us going forward, and which are sort of more team specific. For example, my team, we have a stand up every morning at 9 o'clock where we check in with each other, we review our priorities for the day, and we work off a Trello board for all the activities that we need to complete for that week. And that works really, really well for us. For our dev team, Jira might be a better application for them. And then for our marketing team, they use Airtable. So it's a different thing for everyone.
Yeah.
And I suppose our key challenge was, how do we communicate changes interdepartmentally when we're all on different apps? So we've been working through that. And we found a really happy medium with channels like Slack, where we can all share, do that sharing across the board, and the Trello board for our weekly sort of team huddles. So, finding what works best for everyone is definitely the key there, and finding that happy medium for sure.
Yeah. And it's what you mentioned earlier, Kasey. One size does not fit all.
Yeah.
And it is definitely around the communication of that. And that's one of the things that we tried to make into this deal is it's, one thing to say these are the agreements of our team, but then it's about putting in those activities. So, and they're one of the things that, absolutely we know will make flexible working a success. Is not just, the one thing of agreeing what days we're going to be in the office, but actually the tools that we're going to use, and then how we'll work with other teams internally and then externally for our customers as well, and being upfront about that.
Yeah. And look, one thing we tried to do as well, I think that we really tried to sort of showcase what some of different teams were doing as well, because all of a sudden you might have a team that's particularly struggling with one element, and then they've heard from somebody else, oh, well, we're doing this and this is working really well. And I think as well for our working parents, that really helped. We put something in place through our carers network, our Family Matters network, as we call them, and it was called Family Matters Connect, and we had coffee groups, sort of random coffee groups. You get paired up with people that had similar caring responsibilities that you had, so kids that might be similar ages, or if you were looking after family members or elderly parents or so forth, and you'd catch up for a coffee once a month. There really wouldn't be an agenda, but what we found that was coming out of those is people would suddenly be like, oh, well, I spoke to this person and here's something that is working really well for them, and now I've tried it and this is good. So we just have also tried to set up those connection points as well. Just all those little things. You hear something else and you're like, right, I'm going to steal that for myself.
And I think that's one of the good things. And I know that you did a whole topic on this in one of the last LinkedIn Lives that you did around storytelling, that when people do share those stories, and I think that that's something that we probably need to do now, is start getting those up into the platform, because I think that we had a little break there, but sharing some of those stories will be really, really helpful.
absolutely. I mean, the real stories where we can all share our experiences, what we've been through, what worked for us, what didn't. They're the things that resonate most closely for everyone on the Circle platform, and we've seen it time and time again where people can make connections and form relationships with people they might not otherwise do within the organisation, particularly if you're a large organisation spread quite diversely. So yeah, it's a really great point and be able to learn from each other and be able to share those experiences and see what's working for someone else that you might not have tried yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in terms of those kinds of conversations, that you think would be important to have now coming into this year for working parents and carers, what kinds of things do you think are the most important conversations to have with parents now, given that, what we've been through last year and what for them?
For me, I think it would be how do you need to work this year? How would you like to work? And how can we work together to come to that kind of to get you to that outcome? I think last year we were a little bit all over the place. I'm talking from a personal perspective. I was running kids when the kids could actually go to school. There was no before school care. There was no after school care. We sort of were running on that bare minimum. You also didn't have kids sport either. And that's all starting to kick back up, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to manage this. How did I do this beforehand? And I think there's going to be it's going to be a little bit shaky for I think the next couple of months as people move into sort of as life I think hopefully just keeps going back to normal. So I think it's really speaking to your people and just making sure that you're aware of what is it that they need. And it could be that if you've got a standing meeting every day, and it used to be 9 o'clock because everyone was kind of that they could jump on at that time, but now it needs to be 9:15. That's only a small change. Like you can do that. Or look, for me personally, I've made the commitment that I'm going to try and either do school pickup or school drop off every day. This year, there's going to be weeks where it probably won't happen, but I've tried to set time up in my diary to just make sure it can work, and people are aware of that. And I think having the conversation with your teams, but also empowering them to feel comfortable enough to raise the topic with you as well if you're a people leader. I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of everyone's responsibility in that as well, but it's about how do we create those environments where it can happen. And one of the things that we have just launched is a new learning and performance system. And so within that, we know that one-on-ones are really important, and that's from some of the data that we got when we did a workplace analytics, on who was having one-on-ones, that we know that they're really, really important for people to be having. So we've got some great suggested agendas that are things around well-being, even returning from parental leave, as we know that sometimes, there can be some conversations where people leaders might need support on how to speak to someone that's coming back, whether flexible working is working for them. You might make decisions before you go on leave that seemed good at the time, but then coming back, do those things need to change as well? So creating some support structures in one-to-ones to be able to have that agreement, but also as a part of, I feel like I keep going, but our flex deal is having like an agreed health check as a team as well. So what are some of the ways? And, within our team, it's having a coffee once a week if we can in person, but also starting every meeting with a chat. So it used to be about the block. That was probably the one thing that we got obsessed with. Not everyone would have been, but starting each conversation within teams, finding those places where you can connect, on a personal level to be able to create that trust and an environment where those conversations can be raised about, how people are going. I think it's really important.
It's interesting. I think people definitely within our organisation, that was a really big change for us last year. There was a really big focus on building that into your everyday conversations because people were struggling, and from whatever it would be with lockdown fatigue to, as we said, managing kids and so forth. And I think a lot of the comments that came through with our insight gathering was that everybody just had a new sense of appreciation and understanding for what others were going through, and everyone was a little bit more human. They were more than sort of work colleagues. It wasn't as transactional, and so for us it's really important that we keep that for this year and forward as well.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the things, you know, throughout the profession and bringing that whole self to work. It was something that kind of created in as much as the digital transformation, that bringing the whole self to work really had to happen.
It happened.
You know, we did a great video, and my colleague, you know, Preston, her dog, we would know if he needed to go for a walk, like if it kind of got to, you know, 10:30, 11 o'clock and there's some barking in the background, that that's just something you'd know, you know, meeting people's kids as they would come in the back, that you really got to see the whole gamut of people. And I think that that's absolutely something we wouldn't want to lose in, you know, being able to support and trust each other in the work environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we like to keep it real at Circle as well. And if we're having a crap day, we're more than willing to share that we're having a crap day. Or I had a really late night last time, I need to have a nap. So
exactly. You won't get much out of me. But we were joking before about, you know, blow waving my hair today, that, you know, you really got to see people, no makeup, active wear.
And do you know what? I think it was one of the best things. My highlight was seeing somebody's child climb the bookcase in the background without them realizing, because they were looking for a birthday present. And we were all like, oh my goodness, look what's going on. And you just love it, because you just really saw a sense of your colleagues that you didn't get before. And it really helped, I think, with what everyone was going through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. And so, ladies, what's one thing that you would have to say to organisations now who are wondering where and how to move forward from last year now, who may not have those sort of flex policies or initiatives ready yet to roll out? What kind of advice would you give to those organisations who are still working through this at this time?
I think every organisation is so different, but one of the things that we found successful is actually being able to have those conversations and talk about it. And I know that, Kasey, you mentioned that as well, but being able to, we did some focus groups as well as surveys, you know, and conversations with people about, you know, that co-creation of what works. And that's something that we know is going to be the success at MYOB, is around co-creating what the flexible work environment really means to each individual, and how we can continue to work on that as a team. And it's not just a set and forget. So now that we've got this environment, this is going to happen, we know that things change in people's experiences as well. So yeah, I would say, you know, have a conversation with people and think about that co-creation of any type of initiative in terms of flexibility.
Yeah, I would. You took the words right out of my mouth. I would absolutely agree. I think with that sense of co-creation, you'll have people who perhaps might not have worked in a particular way previously, and they might have been apprehensive. If they're involved in that co-creation, they're more likely to take it forward, and they're more likely to support colleagues who are wanting to work in a little bit of a different way, or adapt in a different sort of way of flexible working. So I think keeping the communication lines open and making it sort of an employee-led sort of project, so to speak, and you're putting in place the tools to help them really drive it forward. And I think as well, just for organisations that may not have sort of something in place yet as well, for your people leaders, really sort of getting their fears out in the open, whether that's within a small group, and saying, okay, what are you most worried about, and looking to address those as well, or what are you concerned about having this for your particular team, so that you can problem shoot those and work out solutions for them and ways of working. I think would really help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key is there is around empowering our people leaders and managers to be able to have, you know, what might be perceived as a difficult conversation, but in fact be a really constructive and productive conversation. Just knowing what can be shared and what can be done, and feeling comfortable about being able to find a scenario that works for everyone. I think this last year has definitely taught us about, you know, having agility and really bringing that flexibility piece to the forefront, and communicating all of our respective needs based on, you know, our family constructs and other priorities outside of the workplace, and but really also bringing it back to connection and making sure that that we're all putting our wellness ahead of that, and keeping in touch with each other, checking in with each other, so that we all feel like our voices are being heard and we can bring our full selves to work, whatever that looks like. Well, thank you, ladies. This has been a really fantastic conversation. I hope everyone got a lot out of that today. If anybody has any questions that you think of after the session, please feel free to contact us at Circle and we'll be more than happy to answer them for you afterwards and share some other practical tips when you're thinking about how you might like to re-engineer your work practices for 2021. Thank you, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon and we'll see you at the next session.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.